who's becoming a soon expert in review.
Yeah, hopefully. So for those that don't like coffee, energy drinks are perfectly acceptable. That's what I do. I have a big cup of white powder that gets me going in the morning. It's actually an energy drink, just to clarify.
Yeah, that is the amino acid, right? The amino acid energy drink.
Yes, amino acid energy, yes.
From Costco, for those of us that have Costco nearby. All right, we are live. Hello, everyone in YouTube world and everyone here in the morning coffee review session in Zoom. Welcome us back. We went out to Hawaii. We are back. Jason still went to Hawaii, then went back to a job site to train. So we have Matt here today. Today, we're going to be talking about PDF repair. And let's say we receive a document or we have a PDF that needs to be repaired. Actually, I was just working with a client yesterday and having a conversation about exporting data and PDF just being so far gone raster wise, but we'll talk about all of that stuff here today. Again, this is about you, the community. So feel free to ask any questions around review if you have any. If you are new folks, how do PDFs break? More scanned documents is usually what happens when I see with PDFs that aren't allowing you to have the metadata. But going back to it, we have Matt here today, myself, I'm Michael Chave, one of the long-term MCRs. My background is structural design, coming from the industry over to ATG. For those folks that are new, what is ATG? And we have Matt here today. Matt, want to give a little intro?
Sure. My name is Matt Linn. I'm an architect. I like to fill in with MCR when either Michael or Jason is absent. Today, like I said, I am an expert question asker. That's my duty today. And I do like this question that came in from David. It said, how do PDFs break? Which was kind of my question. Not only how do they break, but what defines a broken PDF? Is that like if you can't open it? Does that mean it's like write protected? Like, what do you mean by a broken PDF, Michael?
So there's a couple different terms. So let's talk about review as a whole. And I get this when I'm talking with a lot of end users that are transitioning to Bluebeam Review. They're new and right, the industry started out using and didn't have a PDF exporter or PDF writer. That's when the inception of Bluebeam came along, because most folks refer to Bluebeam as the software when Bluebeam is the company. So again, right, design software, there were a couple of engineers who created, because first and foremost, the expert or the exporting software was used for like Microsoft Word. It wasn't really utilized for what we have here today in terms of exporting correct vector data. Now, what happened was they created the company called Bluebeam, which created a writer that was specific for our data being exported out as a portable document format. So this is just a little bit of history of Bluebeam as a whole. Then it was 2007 maybe, or 2008. Okay, it was around then. I should probably know that year, but it was around then when they created Review. So, or maybe that was Studio. Okay, so somewhere around then, Review was created, and that is the software solution we use today. Review is and does follow the ISO standard, so the International Standard Organization for Coding PDFs. So for writing PDFs, right, and coding PDFs, they follow that set standard that majority of the PDF writers follow. So in terms of breaking a PDF, that could happen at the start where the PDF writer wasn't following that ISO standard, and you can't even open that PDF in Review. Now, that's when you would know that they're not following the ISO standard, because you can't open that PDF. Now, majority of PDF viewers or writers or reviewers, I guess you would say, follow that standard. And that's why you can open up their PDF in Review, and vice versa. They can open up your PDF that you've created with or written with Bluebeam Review. So breaking it would be A, not the correct writer, Then the second step would be that it was either a scanned PDF. So they went and scanned the PDF from their scanner. And what happens there is it becomes raster data, which is seen as little squares or pixels. And those become not real, they're images of lines and text. And you can't absorb or grab that metadata from the document itself, right? So I've had this before, and it was funny. I just did a video of this the other day, but
Michael, that should still open though, right? Like it'll open, it'll just be vector. I mean, it'll be pixels as opposed to vectors.
Correct. Yep. So dots or squares, pixels, right? Which I have over here on the right, and I should probably sync this page so we're looking at the same spot.
We do have a question in. Do you want me to ask them as they come in, or you want me to hold?
No, yeah, you do. You all stop.
Okay.
Interrupt me like I interrupt you.
Okay, from Chris, we have, if you have a scanned PDF that is 29.45 by 41.25, but it was a 30 by 42, how can you make the scan the original? I guess it's scanning smaller. It looks like it's scaling it down just barely when you scan it. Is that correct, Chris? The scan is slightly scanning it down in scale.
So it's skewed off. So you can actually reprint your PDFs by going to page setup here. So when you go to page setup, you can then say next. And from here, you can rescale your document size. So if you needed to rechange or change your page setup, this is one way to do that. So that's there to answer your question. And I did like 10 clicks at once. I always do that. I apologize. I went to thumbnails, right clicked, then went to page setup. I believe it's also here in document. So document, page setup, and you can pin this, by the way, to a toolbar. And then from here, you select which documents you're going to manipulate, and then you can hit next, and you can change the type of document size it is correct to the scale it needs to be. So you can refit the PDF and scale it up by that point. What was it? 0.5, it looked like 0.25.
Yeah, it's like a fraction of an inch. So if they were to pull up this document that was 29.45, could they hit fit to media, and would that automatically?
Well, it's going to depend, right?
42?
Yeah. So you could do it to the actual size, right? So you probably wouldn't, because the page media size is going to be to that extent. So you're probably going to want to give it to what it is.
Mm-hmm. So if I'm looking at that preview, it says media size, and then it says page size. So in this case, they're a 1-to-1 ratio. Mm-hmm. In Chris's example, I guess the one on the media size would be that the 29.45 by the 41.25. So if the media size is slightly smaller than the page size, would that fit to media button fill it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any word? We have another question from Ed. Any words of wisdom for embedding or not embedding fonts from CAD?
So the fonts aren't. So be aware. And when you decide to run the optical character recognition from scanned PDFs, right? That was actually another question that we had from a client that I was working with that isn't able to determine or control the way they're receiving PDFs, but they want to get all of that data enrichment from the PDFs to export out to Excel, right? Your hands are kind of tied at that point, right? You do the OCR, it only sees some of the data and it only brings some of that exporting out to Excel. And then some of the Excel is images. That's because Revu couldn't determine if it was actual text data or just something that it couldn't determine, which it gave it an image. Now, when that happens, that is because two things. It is too raster, that it's too pixelized for it to determine what the data is. So it just gives it a squared around image of however much it can't determine. Or the other one is, right, fonts that it can't determine as well. Now, Revu follows SHX fonts only. And if you need to add some because the user of the CAD environment didn't have or got a new one that they wanted and they added it and you needed to bring it over, that's when you'd have to add it to that file. And I forget where that file is, Ed, but if you want to know where that folder lives, you can just ping me and I can look it up. It's just, that's where you're going to drop your new text or that text that you ask from the end user. Hey, well, what text was that?
So the OCR is font specific, and the OCR has to have that specific font loaded in to read that font, is what you're saying?
Yes. And also it's specific to line data too, as well. So it transitions our text and line into vector as much as it can, right? It creates a vector enriched document from a raster document, right? So we're in here, right? We have our two different PDFs, which was raster, ragged lines. That's our scanned image seen as one complete document, right? It's scanned. It's more of an image-based PDF. Over here, we have our vector data, which is more enrichment of line and text separation. And we can see that dramatic difference, right? This is something you can tell right off the bat just from looking at the PDF and zooming in. The other way is to select the icon down below, which is select text or shift T. And then from here, what you could do is you can actually check if text is selectable. So you can go through and select text, which I couldn't do over here if I wanted to. I couldn't select this note because it's seen as one image, right? Those pixels or boxes of what we're seeing. Now, when you're in here, though, you can go through and then also snap to data, right? So if I wanted to snap to lines in here, which is the line portion, over here, I can't do that as well.
Okay, we have another question from Ed. We are more interested in only using TTF fonts, but we want to make sure wherever we give our clients always looks correct without errors or boxes. We also want to make sure whatever we see in Bluebeam is also what we see in Adobe Pro.
So for the then use standard text, right? That would be true type font text. And in Revu still works off of true type font text, but in order to add different fonts, it is the SHX font types. And you have to have Revu Extreme, by the way, to add them. For true type fonts, just use a pretty much a standard text type that all computers have. And a great example would be Arial. Yeah. Sorry.
Could you explain to some of us the difference between TTF and SXF, or what was it? What was the other one?
SHX fonts. Yeah,
thank you.
So just like Revit, I think Revit works off true type fonts, or is it SHX only?
I don't know.
Yeah, TTF. And Revu still does both, but like when you go to the comparison chart, you have the ability to add SHX file fonts. So from here, yeah, true type fonts is what, thank you for reminding me. So you can import file fonts with this from AutoCAD, but true type fonts and the difference, I don't know the like best explanation. So true, let's Google this together.
Sorry, I didn't mean to push you down a rabbit hole.
No, it's fine. Versus open, I guess. Yeah, or SHX, we'll just do that. Autodesk community. Because this is probably something that gets asked a lot within Revit. And it just kicked me out. If you don't, that file not found. What's it? So true type fonts. Okay, so looks like SHX fonts honor line weights, whether inherent through their native property or from a plot style. You can effectively control the weight and thickness of the caricatures. Thereafter referred as the front line weight by.
So that's kind of a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we want to control line weights. And TTF, is that saying TTF will not?
I'm looking.
If Revit is TTF, because I think you can control the line weight of Revit
So
text.
things changed because TrueType fonts were now supported. Most CAD users were split between DOS and graphical windows where TTF could more easily be used. It took several more years before most users started to be seriously consider using TrueType fonts due to the slowness with which AutoCAD handles these fonts. 20 years later, we still see confusion. Sometimes the difference between TrueType fonts. Yes, we're confused right now. So with TrueType fonts, you're limited to 2 font line weights, standard and bold, for any given text height. And you'll need a separate text style for each one. TrueType font line weights are scaled relative to the text height. So want a thicker font line weight, increase the text height. So versus this is the line weight thickness via plot style. Yeah.
That last sentence doesn't make sense to me, but.
So as the height increases, as the height increases, the boldness increases.
Okay.
No, because
that's good to know.
They're the same
because we get, though. Yeah, that's why that last sentence doesn't make sense to me. But that makes sense. I know in Revit we have, the option to bold. So, okay.
Okay, rabbit hole.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Back to where you were.
It's good. DOS. How young are you, Michael? The DOS. That's older folks. Yeah, I was thinking of like computer DOS. I wasn't thinking about DOS text. So if that gives you an explanation of how old I am. Okay.
Michael is still in his 20s, barely. He's got a few more days in his 20s. So now you know.
That was a big joke on the present for Matt Linn over here. Okay, so back to it. Again, you're able to go through and snap to line weight. So as we go through and check, right, I can snap to line weight over here, but over here, I do not have that ability. And there's a great actual explanation on Bluebeam's website. If you're ever wondering vector versus raster, they give a very in-depth
while you're punching this in, it's also worth noting that in Revit, and most of you probably know this, but if you print with shadows, it will automatically push you to raster. You don't have an option to do vector with shadows, which is frustrating at times.
Thank you. My birthday is next week on Thanksgiving, if anyone wanted to know. Actually, and by the way, we have a special morning coffee. We'll announce it in a video. Special morning coffee review next week. So hopefully with prizes, by the way, next week. And it is a competition. I like competitions. So be ready. Going back to here, though, their explanation of vector versus raster, it's pretty clean, cut, and dry in here. Do they talk about types of fonts? Okay. But if you ever wanted a great explanation about this, you'll see that a raster image is created from a series of square dots called pixels. And then one example of PDF files scanning a paper, a scanned PDF by marking a bitmap image like a JPEG or a TIFF. The next one is vector. And like Matt was saying, when you're printing from, for those of us Revit users and even AutoCAD, you could still do this as well. And we'll have to confirm with Mr. Artley from Civil 3D, but it follows, I'm guessing, because it does follow AutoCAD, right? You can print to raster. And like Matt was saying, if you're doing shadows, it forces you to do raster, or does it just change it to raster? Like
it's your only option. You cannot do vector with shadows. And Beth makes a good point as well. Also true for depth queuing. And she says you can make it a bit better by upping your DPI when you know it's going to push you to raster, which is a good idea. I do at least 300 if it's something, especially if it's going to be a deliverable for a client or presentation. It obviously the file size is going to be a lot larger on that plot, but it's worth it. If you go down to like 150, text gets incredibly hard to read.
And maybe you can do a mix set, right? If you're dealing with clients that are also trying to get metadata, more vector enriched PDFs, maybe send a package that doesn't host the shadows, right? Because you're going to have your plan sets and it's going to probably print all the ones selected. So maybe, at least in Rev it will, right? Because you're selecting them and it's going to plot them all the same. Maybe just do your elevations that have those shadows, those enrichments in terms of you doing a presentation and how it looks as the raster. Come back and then do your own plans, like your sections, your details, your plan views all in vector, and then just slip sheet the new ones in or combine them however you want to in Revu, because you have Revu that it's very easy to go in and do that. Yeah. Put the link in the chat for us. Yes. What else? That's it, Matt? Okay.
Yeah, so if we, so when we create a rasterized plot, Bluebeam does have the option to run an OCR command to make it text, right?
Yes. The caveat being it's only in the edition of Extreme. So if I wanted to do that, I can. I have Extreme. For those folks that are wondering if they have the ability to do this themselves, is looking up at the menu bar. You have Review and then you have About. And this will tell you which edition of Review you have. I have Extreme. You have to have Extreme in order to run the optical character recognition. When I'm talking with clients that are asking what type of review do I need, I always recommend one version of Extreme for exactly this instance. If I need to run the optical character recognition, where I can go through and select text, right? Because we verified can't select text. I can go up to here under documents and run my optical character recognition here. Now, this is going to give you some options when you're in the OCR, and this is going to say what type of language you're using, what format the documents it is. So you're assisting Revu in what type of data it's going to be converting, like tables and forms or just a text document that was scanned. But I know this is a computer design scanned documents. Then you have some additional options like correct any skews that are off. And by the way, this does not work. I had this question asked before. This does not work for handwritten text. It's not going to convert it to be editable text or hand-drawn lines. It can't interpret those, by the way. But okay. Going back to detect orientation. Is there any vertical text? I'll probably put that. Am I going to skip vector pages? So this is a great area too, because Revu knows if it's vector data or raster data. And now I can see here, am I just going to altogether skip? Because like Matt sent me a set, and now that I asked him to do half raster for his elevations that he has to show how the building looks in terms of shadows. And then the other ones are going to be vector. I can just skip those vector ones here. And I'm going to hit OK, and it's going to run that optical character recognition. Depending on how fast your computer is and what type of document it is, it's going to change that time of it loading and changing this OCR. And now I have the ability to go through and select my text.
So I notice it's still fuzzy. It still looks rasterized, but it can read it.
Yes, exactly.
It doesn't sharpen the image for you.
No. You can do the PDF repair. I don't think it even changes the DPI, but it will do the adverse when you're repairing the document or reducing the file size. But you can go through and repair your documents if you want to. So this can go through and process any wipeouts, text, or objects. You can fix striped images. You can combine adjacent images. You can optimize solid color. You can remove text clipping. You can simplify clipping paths. You can repair any fonts if you needed to. So you can run this repair if you would like to as well. And we'll tell you what's wrong and what not for a report. Or the adverse, you're trying to send out a PDF set that is too large in size, or you're receiving a PDF set that is too large in size and you need to not reduce it, because when you're receiving it, well, you're trying to compress it down so that the data isn't so vast. You can do that by using this reduce file size here. And this can compress it by quality. And this is a scale bar, and you're going to have to play with it. It's to each their own, in my opinion, on which way they go. But once you go to complete compression, you're going to even see that it's going to reduce it. If you do this on a vector document, I haven't seen too much reduction. There's like a slight pixelization, but it's not a lot. When you do this on a raster PDF, it starts to become blurry, like you can't see if you don't have glasses or something like that. Is there a question, Matt?
Yeah, Doug says, I like to run the OCR in 10 to 15 page batches, seem to work better with larger files.
Yes, that's another thing. Running the OCR on a large document set, takes a lot of time if your computer isn't able to handle it. I've run it on this computer. I think it was like a 200-page document set, and it ran all the OCR on it. And it took about, I think it was like 20 minutes. But it was taking the company that I was showing about 2 hours, 3 hours. And that's a great way to expedite that, would be to export or extract PDFs. And you can go through and either do it individual, which could also be a great thing. You bring them out as individual and then you bring them back together, could be an answer for that as well. And I believe, let me see before I say it. Yeah, you could do it from batch, right? So you could add all of those singular ones, but it probably will take the same amount of time if you do it that way. I haven't tried it that way.
So Ed asks, what does Bluebeam like? Cores, GPU, RAM?
It's definitely graphics driven, but multiple. I don't know if it leverages multiple cores. That would be something I could definitely get an answer to from Buck, because he's more of the expert on how many cores a software is using, not so much for me. But it is definitely graphics driven, and you can actually choose what's processing a lot of the PDF power by going through your interface and going to advanced, and you can say, is it running off what part, the hardware or the software is doing a lot of the rendering per itself, or legacy. And these are some of your options here as well. And Matt was saying that maximum DPI, when he was printing to raster, you have that same item here as well. Is there any other questions?
Nope, not in the chat. Nope.
And back to your comment, because I saw that there was RAM in there as well. So random access memory is what assists your CPU. I mean, your CPU. I was getting confused. I thought I was saying GPU. Assists your CPU. So whenever you press a command or type anything or go through and select a command in your software, it is asking for a step-by-step instruction, your CPU is. And where does it store those step-by-step instructions on where it's executing those commands? It is in your random access memory. So the more random access memory you have, the more commands can be executed by your CPU. So just be aware, right? The more RAM you have, the more commands you can run. The larger, more heavy commands that are asking for step-by-step instructions and what they're doing, like optical character recognition, that's just going to feed you more power.
So would that also assist in running several softwares simultaneously?
Yeah. Yep. And if you're looking for hardware and it's hard to come by right now, and hardware that's not really built for our industry, it's funny because most design softwares, I get this question asked a couple of times, not a whole lot, but most design softwares, people will say that they have gaming desktops. And I'm like, great. Do they know video games run off a single core? And most of our softwares run off multi-cores. So you got a desktop that was built for not our industry, which we here at ATG have BIMbox, which is built directly for our industry. So if you're looking for something, we have also all the parts. So in terms of graphic cards, especially with the new ones that came out, the 30s, which are hard to come by, we have it all in stock. If you're looking for a laptop or a new desktop, feel free to reach out. But segue back into Revu. Now we're talking about repairing PDFs. So there's sometimes where PDFs are coded as raster and vector, or more raster, I guess, and they have GIFs and GIFs encoding into their viewports, which are also lending to the slowness. So if you've ever had a large document set, mine are all clean, but I'm just going to open up a large document set here. And as you go through to your thumbnails panel, and when you go to your thumbnails panel for that document set, it's going slow, right? When it's loading these, that could be two things, right? First and foremost, I always check where my PDF was written. So if you are receiving, you're not able to control the writer of your PDF, you probably, if you are having an issue, I will always recommend, and even on support from Bluebeam, always recommends creating or recreating their PDF as a Bluebeam written PDF. And how do we A, check that, and then B, do that? You can hit Control D on your keyboard, and it's going to tell you who created these PDFs. Right here, it says PDF producer, and you can go through and see what PDF producer, this was a legacy. And maybe I should even go back and rewrite this as well, as I think the new one's like Brewery or something, as a Bluebeam written PDF, maybe as a newer one, right? In terms of coding your PDFs. And this is the way you can check that. I always, whenever it's never Bluebeam here, recreate it as a Bluebeam written PDF. Just going to be better performance in what you have in your written. It still follows the standard, right? You're still able to open the PDF, but some of those writers are a little iffy on how they code their viewports. And sometimes those viewports are coded as GIFs and GIFs, which are very heavy in file management and file saving size. So just be aware of that in terms of data.
So when printing from Revit, you recommend always using the Bluebeam writer?
Yes.
Okay, David says, how do you do this?
Do what? The B step?
I would assume, how do you ensure that when you're printing, you're using the correct Bluebeam coder?
Yeah, it's a Bluebeam writer. So it's just Bluebeam. What is it?
So maybe go through a print dialog and show us how,
Yeah. So you're just making sure it's a Bluebeam PDF writer. But how do I recreate it? So if I received one that isn't a Bluebeam written PDF, you can go File. From File, you go to Create From. And this is where you're going to rewrite your PDF as a Bluebeam written PDF. So I go to File, Create From, and then I can go down and just select a PDF set here. Well, actually, let me just do this. Let me save this to my desktop. There we go. Then from here, I can go File, Create From. Is it going to let me do it while it's open? Probably not. So let me close it.
Is this create from command, is this the same as, what if you just printed that PDF using the PDF writer? Is that doing the same thing, or is it doing different things?
No, it's different. Yep. Where is this? That's an SS. It is different because I've tried that. And this will overwrite that file. It's going to open it. Yes, replace. Now Control D here. And I have, yeah, see, it is brewery. 5.0 is the new writer. And this can be done by the way, in the application of the stapler as well. So for those folks that didn't know, when you download Revu, you do have the stapler. So if you go to Windows Explorer and you're going to go to a document, you can do the same thing from in here. And it even asks you, by the way, when you have that, when you download Revu, do you want to have these as quick access down here in your status bar? So by the way, you can have them both down there in your status bar too.
So that convert files in Revu, is that doing the same thing as the as what you're doing? Okay. Okay, Doug, interesting. I'll keep this in mind. David, can this be done to your file if you already have markups applied?
I've never tried it, but we can try it.
Oh, this is fun.
Yes. So let's go to here, save. I'm overwriting with my original one, and I'll do Control D here just to show you. This one is going to be the same old one here. Let me just go to here. Just add some of these. Okay. Overwrite. I don't think there is a. Yeah, there's not. Okay.
David says, thinking that if you print it with markups, they would become part of the file, not be markups.
You already called it. Yep.
So it flattened it, right?
Yep. Can I unflatten it though? Nope. Yeah, here's a new one. So flattened your markups with it.
Okay. So it works, but can't undo it.
Yeah, I can't even go in and grab them.
You can print without markups though. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
You could do that and then copy paste all your comments, I guess. Or
you can just export your comments as a different file extension, right? And then delete them. So you can always go through and in your markups list, for those folks that didn't know, 3 dots, 3 lines, you can go to your markups. You can export your markups. It'll save them as a .bax file because you can always insert markups from an old PDF set that are the .pdf extension, but you can also just export your markups from the .bax file type and import as well.
So that could be overlaid on a new document that's been recoded?
Yes. So have you seen export and import markups, Matt?
I have not, no.
Okay, so here's an old set here. I ruined that plan set. What did I do to this PDF? There it is. Okay. So from here, now what I could do is I can go through and insert. So I can import comments from either the BAX file, right? So let's say this was an old set and I just wanted the markups to go away and then pull them in, or I could still have the .pdf extension and import markups from there as well. So for those asking, maybe as a mental ask, not verbally asking me. So I have import comments. Again, you could do it from the .pdf or a BAX file. It's up to you. So from here, I'm going to do all comments from a PDF extension. And it's going to bring in all the comments because the file had all of them and they weren't individual. But it's bringing in the same markups, the same location. Just be aware, it's that same markups in the same location. So for those folks that love to move viewports, we should start making a trend to not move viewports. Right? Fix the data where it is versus in the viewports or the views for those folks that are using Revit where they reside originally, right? If they have to move, sometimes they have to move, but what you can do is you can select all your markups and then you can move them up or down by doing a select all. So I can go to here and you can grab them and move them where you need to. I don't know if you can play Tetris too if you wanted. So Tetris being up and down arrows or left click, hold and drag to move them.
David says that's a new one. Didn't know you could copy markups over like that. Nice.
Yes.
I agree with David. New to me too. What is that thing in the bottom right-hand corner? This isn't a Bluebeam question. I'm just trying to figure out what that is. That big purple blob on the sheet.
Oh.
Yes. For historic building. Okay. All right. Just curious on what that is.
Mm-hmm. Have historic building left. So be aware that you have that ability to export and import comments from one PDF to the next. Now, there's usually questions where it's like, hey, Mike, I have a full commented document set like this. How can I go about just bringing over specific comments? You can do that with the layers feature, right? So Doug, and I know Doug does this because we saw his things automatically get put onto a layer. That's great because you can turn things off, right? So you can have this not export feature for that layer because you can't go here and say, I don't want some comments to export, but I want these to export. The only way to do that and control that is by your layers. So just be aware, layers are going to be your pal in doing this export import feature of your comments from one PDF to the next.
Doug says, yep, Troy taught me that. Embed layers into your tools.
Yep. Troy has some great tips. He has what was that? Chapter 2 forms for a forum. Forum is how you say it, right? Yeah, forum. A forum where you can go. Yeah. He has the forum where you can go and ask questions. It's a great area. So if you guys ever want to check it out, feel free to check it out. So shout out to you over the Brainery. There you go. Thank you, David. So just a shout out to him and you should go check it out. Again, remember, this is about the community. So if any of you all, Liz has showed up before, she has tips and tricks on LinkedIn. So again, this is about you, the community. If you have things to share them. If you have questions, please ask as well. Because again, this is about you. So what I have topic wise is just to fill the time. And if you have questions, please ask because we can go down a rabbit hole like this TrueType font versus SHX font.
It looks like we have a raised hand. Is that a thing? I don't know what to do with it. Chris has a raised hand.
Yeah. Chris, if you want to chat it, or do you want us to unmute you? Oh, he put his hand down. So maybe it was an accident.
It's back up.
He's waving at us. It's a virtual wave.
Oh, hi, Chris. If I knew how to unmute you, I would, but I don't know how.
Yeah, I'm in there, David. So if you ever, I see some questions and stuff pop up. Whenever I have time, I try to look at it. And if I would reply, I guess is something I need to start doing. But been pretty busy, been on island time, Matt and I. But back to here. So as we go through and look at items, again, we had the ability to recreate the PDF as Bluebeam written PDFs. You can check that to start off with who wrote the PDF as the writer by going to the Control D or document properties, which are going to show you all of that. You will then see your PDF writer and what edition it was written in. And then you can go back and recreate that PDF as a Bluebeam written PDF. Then your other options, right? For an instance, we had someone that wanted to move things to Excel. There is a threshold, right? Just like any software. And I'm going to bet anything else couldn't export it either. If it's too raster, it's too pixelized, the software is not going to be able to interpret the data. So when you're doing things like the export feature from either PDF or to Word, you're going to hit a threshold, right? If it is raster data, it's going to be pixelized. The software just can't interpret what it's trying to export, and you're not going to get a good export out from your PDF software. So just be aware of that. Do we have time to talk about dealing with PDF locks? Security purposes, yes, we do, Doug. What is your, I'm guessing it's security purposes. Sorry, I jumped the gun. I'm guessing he's typing it while.
I'd like to know that too for security. Like when I get a PDF and I try to put a stamp on it and send something that it says, nope, you can't.
So yes, Matt's talking about lock, and you're saying if I put a signature on the page, what is the encryption after it's been signed? There's two different things. So when you go through and add a signature, let me save this out because it's going to overwrite my page. Okay. So folks, writing a signature saves it and encrypts the documents. So I always, since I have practice ones, I don't want to overwrite those ones. So I'm going to save this to my desktop here. And then when I go through and I sign something, and for the encryption, I always refer to Bluebeam's website. So when you're getting ready to sign something, right, it's not encrypted yet.
How did you get there, Michael? How did that
set scales and such? What?
Where'd you get that blue box?
Okay.
You zipped around and it popped up.
So Revu allows you to sign documents, and you can do that in any edition. I think you can still do it in standard. If any of those standard folks are out there, I think you can still create a signature box. You just can't delete the box, maybe. I think it was. I just forget. But so from tools, if you have extreme, you can go to signature, and I still think you can do this in standard. I just don't think you have the form creation is what standard has. But from here, you have the ability to create a signature box, and this is where you can sign. In any edition, I know you can sign like this, except for the free version of Revu. So viewer, you cannot sign the PDF. You can fill out form fields, but you cannot sign the PDF because the feature of the signature is this encryption area, which is creating a signature ID. And that is when the documents get signed. And you have two different things and ways to do as a digital signature or document certification. And I forget what. Encryption, spelled it wrong, but it's fine. I believe what encryption it has. It's not going to tell me in this one. It follows some type of encryption. I'll just put this in the chat if you want to look through this.
Okay, we've had a couple more comments come in. I've run into this with locked PDFs not allowing me to set scales and such.
Yep.
Doug said I've had them where I've had to open them in Google to remove the encryption. Yeah,
so if a PDF is locked, and it depends on who's locking it and what their PDF producer is allowing to lock, because Revu is still going to abide by those encrypted locks. So there was an intent behind those locks, and for at least Revu, you have to have a password to unlock it. I don't know. It's going to come back to whatever the PDF producer does for encryption on their locks. And it sounds like you have a workaround, and don't worry, I beat up on Matt all the time.
I hear you, Doug. That's interesting though, Doug. You had to open it in Google. Can you open a PDF in Google? Is that a thing?
Yeah, it's your Google window. So like when you open a PDF, instead of opening it from your viewer, you open it up in like Microsoft Edge. But it sounds like that breaks the encryption. So it sounds like you have a workaround. Otherwise, you have to get the password, right? So I know Revu's password is password encrypted, But from here, again, when I go through and certify the document by a signature, I'm logging in, I have my signatures. And again, I had a customer ask the other day. So I like to tell everyone things that I've been asked, because maybe someone wants to ask the question, but doesn't know that they need to ask the question or something. You can create an actual signature. So if you want to do a custom sign here, right, you can do a handwritten sign from here that's encrypted by your signature by a password. So you don't have to worry about someone coming in. Like Matt, for instance, I work structural but I'm not a licensed PE. Matt's a licensed architect. He probably signs and seals with his signature, right?
Never. Keep that liability off the sheet.
Yeah. So
again, if you were to do this and send it to me, I can open it in Google and get rid of it.
He's talking about something he's received, and it's probably by whoever's sending it to him. Yeah, it's a process.
It's a process.
So it's just determined on who the writer is, and it sounds like whatever writer he's receiving, there's a way to do that.
Okay, Chris, can you insert a BMP or JPEG in that block? A bitmap.
This right here. So this can be done as you can create a new one. And what you're going to do is you're going to go through and you're going to say from file, and it's whatever file. I don't know what file maps it lets you. Yeah, there's BMP, and you said a GIF. No, JPEG. Yeah, JPEG right here.
Yeah, there's the bitmap too. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Doug, sometimes if you can break it into individual files, it kills the encryption. Good to know.
So for those folks out there that are trying to do that, I
think Doug and I are more interested in breaking the encryption than creating it.
So that's signing it, and it'll create an encryption on the PDF once it's signed. But going back to saving security-wise, so you have documents security, and this is allowing you to provide Revu Hackers Unite. This is providing security behind Bluebeam's reviews. No, Bluebeam as a company's encryption in their software Revu and how they encrypt their PDFs. So if you wanted to provide security when you're sending your documents out, you can do that here as well. So you can change permissions, and you can create a preset one where you save it, and then you don't have to always have these same selections. So what you're going to do first is you're going to go through and say, hey, do they have to have a password just to open the PDF? That's probably going to be a pain, but some people may want that, right? So in order for them to even open the PDF themselves, they have to call me for this password to open it, or however you want it. Why would you send in an email? Because then it would just be taken anyways if you were worried about them opening it. But sidetrack here. Then the next one is require password to print, copy, or edit. So that's not what this is doing yet, because you're going to change those settings down here. But it's saying this is what you will do if you decide for all of these. You're going to create a password. You're going to verify that password. Are you going to allow them to print? Yes or no? And if you do allow them to print, in what type of resolution? Next one is, are you going to allow changes? So can they make changes to the documents? Can they fill out form fields? So maybe you're locking everything in the PDF but form fields, right? So they can go in and type their name, the date, whatever they need to fill in on a form field, or adding markups, or inserting, delete, rotating pages. All modifications except extracting pages, right? So are you going to allow them to make these changes? The next one is allow copy text or graphics. Can they snip, snag, grab anything off their PDF? That's what this copying text or graphics is. The next one is
AIA used that option.
Yeah.
And actually building codes have used that option, because I've tried to go into building codes and copy some snippet and throw it on a life safety sheet.
Can't. Yeah. So that's copying text and graphics. They cannot unless they verify a password. You'll see a lock on the PDF. And then what type of encryption are you using? This is probably falling into David and Doug. Let's figure out which one can't be broken, and then you can tell people which one can't. I've seen spec documents.
Yep.
So from here, you can encrypt these and whatever encryption you want to look up for these, right? Just depends on your department and who needs to know what this is. Then you can save this, right? So if I just put a password in here, okay, I was scared it was going to show my usual password. So So I could save this so I don't have to come in and do this each time. You just hit the drop down and what you save it as. I'm not going to, I think I saved this out somewhere. So security, I want to show the message again. So let me change these. Then hit save. And now it's locked. So here's this will change. You have to close it out for you not to be able to see like what it says. It won't let you do. So from here, I can still do a couple of my things. I can't go through and do any editing comments. I need to close it out and then reopen it, I guess. I think I saved it to my desktop. I hope I did. Yeah, there we go. So as you can see, all of my markups are grayed out. I can't go through because I said you don't have that ability. I can't even print. So I can't go through and print. How do I get access to allowing myself to do this? Or you have that document security. And then from here, you can go through and unlock it as well. So here's your password to be able to go through and do that if you're going to share it with somebody or not. And then Doug is saying if you open it, he said it's a process, but let's just try it. You opening it from here, like Google Chrome, maybe. That's a different one. I'll let you try to figure it out, see if different encryptions work or not. But we are coming up on the end of time. If anyone has any following questions, we have 2 minutes left. By the way, we have a game for next week, or competition, I guess you would say. But prizes for good old Turkey Day, except for Doug. Doug already had his Turkey Day up in Canada. But for those folks here in the US of A, or even you on YouTube land, if you're not listening in here from the United States, somewhere else, we will be having some giveaways. So I'll have to get clarification if we can ship winning things to those folks. But if you want to, I recommend not being in the YouTube live stream. I recommend joining the Zoom stream, and I'm pretty sure Carrie can help you out with the link if you ever wanted one. So feel free to leave in the comments. Before you take off today here, everyone in the Zoom land, please look at our survey at the end. It does help us out. So leave any questions you have. If Matt was good or not, should we forever ban him or allow him to come back? Put those in the comments. We can't be better unless we know how we're performing. So please put those in the comments and any other topics. And also, by the way, if anyone would like to join us on here live like Doug did, please leave it in the comments. We'd love to hear with you. Love to have you on here to hear about your workflow and talk through us with what you found and use Revu for yourself. Thank you all today for attending, and thank you, Matt, for jumping in. Any last words, Matt?
No, this was fun. Thanks for having me. I look forward to the next time.
Yes, the next time for sure. Matt is definitely going to be a new addition to help us fill in. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, DJ CJ, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. And Jason will be back, by the way. See you all then.
Thanks.